This happened years ago when I was 19. I'm now in my mid-20s. I still remember this very clearly because of how creeped out I was. Back then, I was living 600 plus miles away from my parents in a different state. Even though there was a distance, my mom and I still talked on the phone at least twice a week, and we were still really close. So when we found out her cancer was back, I didn't think twice about dropping everything to drive down to see her. A plane ticket would be too expensive, and I had a 10-year-old Toyota that might have been a bit beat up, but still got me from A to B cheaply and quietly. My parents weren't thrilled at the idea of me driving the 11 hours by myself, but my mind was made up. So they offered me a deal. I would stop at a rest stop every 2 to 3 hours and stretch my legs and call them, and in exchange for this courtesy, they would pay for my gas. If I didn't call within the 3-hour window though, they would assume I'd been in an accident and call me repeatedly, interrupting the audiobook/podcast they knew I would have on. I accepted the deal, and that's why I was at this particular rest stop at 2:45 a.m. This was actually one of the nicer stops. Well lit, multiple vending machines that didn't have huge cages around them. The payphone wasn't broken and it looked clean. There were a couple of cars there with people sleeping in them. I still had 15 minutes before I had to check in with my parents. I got out of my car and stretched, and then I almost jumped out of my skin when I heard a man's voice right behind me. "Miss, can I ask you for a favor?" I turned around and he's leaning against my car. I have no idea how he got there so fast. I didn't see him when I parked, but there he was, uncomfortably close to me. He looked like he was in his 40s. He didn't look dirty or twitchy. He was too close, but his body language didn't scream threatening. And even though I was only 19 years old, barely over 5 feet, and at that point in my life, 110 pounds soaking wet at best, and even though I had already binged a lot of true crime media and knew the dangers of a girl my age alone at night with an out-of-state license plate, my dumbass asked what he needed. He told me that he accidentally locked his keys and his phone in his truck, and could he just borrow my phone real quick to call his friend? That it will only take a second and it would really help him out. I almost handed him my phone. I was reaching into my pocket to hand it to him with a "no problem," and then I actually looked at his face. Like I said, this rest stop was surprisingly well lit, and this guy looked really normal. Except for his eyes. He had dead shark eyes. You know what I'm talking about. It's the Ted Bundy look. Smiling, but the eyes are vacant and creepy and staring way too hard. I got that feeling, that runaway feeling. I knew immediately not to hand this guy my only way to call for help. So I put on my best customer service smile and told him, "Oh, I'm so sorry, but I don't have a charger and I need to save all my battery for the tracking app my parents have on my phone, and that I need juice to call my parents, which I actually have to do right now, but good luck." And I turned around and walked 20 feet away. And he doesn't leave. He's still just standing against my car watching me. And now I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to leave him alone with my car because he creeped me out, and he's got a serial killer face, so going to the bathroom is out. But I also wanted to get away from him, prove I'm not going to help, and maybe he'll leave. I could technically get into the car, but I would have to get really close to him, unless I crawled over my passenger side seat, and he's not moving. So I did the first thing that popped to mind. I called my dad, and my dad, for the first time that night, didn't pick up the phone. When I heard his voicemail, I glanced back. The guy still hadn't moved. He's still just staring at me. So I faked a phone conversation with my dad. I angled my body so that the guy couldn't see that I had hung up, and loudly said that I should be home in about 30 minutes, when in reality, I was still at least 4 hours away. I mentioned exactly where I was and reassured the fake caller that this was a good rest stop with plenty of lighting and a couple of visible security cameras. The guy still hadn't moved, and I'm running out of steam on this fake conversation. In the years since, I've thought of a lot of things I could have said while still pretending to talk to my dad, but in that moment I was beginning to seriously freak out and my mind went blank, so I hung up and didn't know what to do. I'd hoped the fake phone call would scare him off, but he was still leaning against my car. I stalled for another couple minutes, bought some cookies from the vending machine, even walked around for a little bit. At this point, he's been leaning against my car staring at me for at least 10 minutes. I honestly debated waking up one of the men sleeping in their parked cars and asking for help. And just the thought of having to wake somebody up to help me get into my own car annoyed me enough that I stopped stalling and headed back to my car. I decided that unless he touched me, I was just going to pretend he wasn't there. He waited until I was unlocking my car door before he started talking to me again. He told me again that he really needs to use my phone. He's stranded here unless he can call his friend to bring the spare keys. He's not angry or begging. His voice sounds weirdly friendly, but he's been creepily watching me for way too long, while blocking my exit, so I'm not falling for it. I almost pointed out the working payphone just in case I'm wrong about this, and I was being a bitch to a guy who needs help. But then he leaned forward as I was getting in, and I lost all nerve and slammed and locked the door as fast as possible. He didn't move until I started the car and put it in reverse, and then he finally stepped back and let me pull out. I didn't even have my seatbelt on. I was so focused on getting away from him. And then halfway out of the rest stop, my mom called me. My mom, who would freak out if I didn't pick up right away and who was already sick. And I needed to put on my seatbelt. I could still see him in my mirror. He was standing right next to where I was parked with his back to me. He was far enough away that I felt okay parking again to answer the phone, but I kept my engine running and I kept watching him. I don't want my mom to worry, so I told her everything is fine, where I am and my ETA. Now that I was in my locked car away from him, I was beginning to feel like I had overreacted. She scolds me about speeding and I tune her out because the guy is moving now. As my mom lectures me about road safety, I watch the guy cross to a truck, unlock the door and get in. The keys being locked in no longer seemed to be an issue for him. I watched the truck head back out to the freeway and drive out of sight. I had to pretend to be fine to not upset my mom. I didn't get back onto the road for another 20 minutes, and when I did, I didn't speed, and I didn't want to see that truck. Found out years later that the closest city to that rest stop has a major problem with sex trafficking, and those girls who look like they don't live nearby, or maybe look like they're living out of their cars, tend to be targets. I don't know if that was what was happening, or if he was just trying to scare me into handing over my phone. When I was 9 or 10, my mother had finally broken up with her wealthy yet abusive boyfriend. We had recently moved back to my hometown of Sacramento from Kingman, Arizona, and I was having trouble adjusting to our new life. Where before we lived in a big, nice house in beautiful communities with very little crime, my mom, now being a single mother of 2, moved us into a small townhouse community and not the best of neighborhoods. Luckily, I had met a girl at school I really connected with. By chance, she happened to live in a fourplex complex across the street, and we quickly became inseparable, as did our moms. Her mom was a lesbian, and her girlfriend was also a good friend of my mom. It was not unusual for them to be at our house late into the night, them up drinking and laughing in the living room, and us giggling and gossiping about the boys at our school upstairs in my room. Well, this particular night was no different. It was pretty late, so we decided to just have a sleepover. My best friend and I ran across the street to her empty house to grab her blanket and sleepover bag. We were laughing as we walked up her driveway, but she stopped suddenly and all the color drained from her face. Nobody was home, but all the lights were on in her house, and the front door was wide open, while a shadow danced on the wall. Terrified, we ran back to my house and burst through the front door, both crying and babbling about a man being in the house. My uncle, who happened to be staying with us for a short while, ran over, but when he got there, the door was shut and locked, and the house was dark. The adults laughed and told us we were imagining things, that we watched too many scary movies, and that it was late and we were tired. We both knew what we saw, and it never really left our minds. Weeks go by and strange things start happening in her house. Doors that we closed would be open when we came back, and things in their rooms would be rearranged. Clothes and underwear started going missing. Her mom's and her girlfriend's sex toys started going missing. Obviously, this was left untold to us, but they were still convinced that nothing weird was going on. Until one night. It was late and I was spending the night. My older sister was babysitting us and we were playing Donkey Kong Country. We got bored and my best friend mentioned she had Mario Kart in a box in their garage. The light was broken and their landlord was more of a slumlord and never fixed anything. So we grabbed flashlights and went to search. She knew the box was in the far back corner, so we made our way around piles of junk when she tripped and fell. She stood up and we both pointed our flashlights at what she fell over. It was a pile of blankets. That wasn't hers. We realized that somebody had made a little cubby, hidden in their barely ever used garage, and we also found a hole that led outside that someone had sawed out. Needless to say, we screamed and ran inside, and my sister called 911 and our mom, who ran over to sit with us. Turns out somebody had been living in their garage for weeks, if not months. Since they didn't have a washer or dryer in there, they rarely if ever ventured in there, so no one ever noticed. The hole the person sawed in the wall faced the back of the building and no one ever went back there, so it wasn't visible from the street or driveway. Worst of all, they found a ton of shit in there that the person had been sneaking in the house to steal. Dirty underwear, the missing sex toys, food, pictures, etc. When he heard them leave and knew the house was empty, he would just come inside through the door and go through their things, eat their food and use the bathroom. The guy never came back and they never caught him. The scariest part is that I spent the night there often, and who knows what could have happened had he been violent. Or maybe he was violent and was waiting for the right time to strike. Luckily for us, we'll never have to know. Alright, so I'll try to keep the backstory as short as possible. A couple of years ago, my living situation evaporated faster than I had expected it to, and I had to pack all my possessions into my car and leave where I was living. There was going to be a short stretch of time where I had next to no money. Certainly not enough for a week or two of $80 a night motel fees. A little over $100 all in, so I bought a cheap tent and other similarly crappy camping equipment and some ramen and decided I would crash in the woods. That way I could leave my car full of my stuff and still have a place to sleep. I lived in a fairly forested area at the time, and since I grew up in the area and partied out in the woods a lot in high school, I knew a decent amount of trails and discreet hiding places not far from said trails. So I brought my gear out to a very small mountains, and since it was going to rain that night, I hunted around for a nice place to set up. Being a mountain, I couldn't just find high ground, but I did find this nice little plateau that projected a few hundred feet from the nearest slope before falling off, and by my best judgment, it seemed as safe a place as any. Well, it turns out my judgment sucks. Not only was the place right in the path of the rain, but all of the water from above had piled it into an impromptu stream whose course ran right through my tent. I woke up at maybe 2 a.m. to find my sleeping bag half immersed in water and all my possessions soaked through. Both my phone and flashlight were ruined, so I had no source of light. Despite the lack of illumination, I knew I had to get back to my car because I was freezing cold. Since my clothes were literally soaked through, I decided to leave them and embarked wearing nothing but my boxers. My wallet was ruined too, so I didn't bring it. I quickly realized that I was not going to be able to find the trail, so I went back and took my machete, and that way I could hack through the brush. Now most of you can probably see where things are going, but I would remind you that you are sitting someplace warm and reasonably safe. If you want to put yourself in my frame of mind, think of those cold winter days when you go outside and your stream of consciousness transforms from normal thoughts into an endless stream of screw this, and add a bunch of your possessions being ruined into the mix. So I faced the general direction of my car and just started walking, angrily chopping at anything that happened to block my path. Eventually, after much effort, I see an end to the tree line ahead of me. I walk out and realize that I'm in somebody's backyard. Worse, however, is the fact that said backyard has a screened-in porch with a small table lamp, and standing on that porch is a woman smoking a cigarette. Now really picture this scene in your head. You can click my profile if you want to see what I look like. Now imagine that image soaking wet, walking into your backyard half naked and enraged, swinging a machete around like a madman. The porch lights went off and I immediately went into I'm definitely going to get arrested mode. I hustled out to the street and ran towards my car, then spent the next hour huddled in a ball on the street, just waiting for the flashing blue lights to come up behind me. They never did, however. I have no idea what the woman thought when she saw me, but it couldn't have been good. I'd almost want to go over there and apologize for scaring her, but I'm guessing she doesn't want to see me. I worked at a local government agency for a long time. Each summer, we would get a new crop of interns. Most were fined. Some caused issues, like when we caught 2 of them making out in the file room. Overall, they were just normal kids from high school or college trying to get some work experience. In 2016, my department received an intern later than usual, right in the middle of the summer. Warner was a bit older than the usual crowd, around my age, maybe late 20s. We finally hit it off pretty well, and although I found him sort of strange, I didn't mind since he was friendly and we had some common interests. He was the only person in the department who was even close to my age. The interns were all teenagers, and the regular staff averaged around 60, older than my mom. I was psyched to have a peer to chat with, so occasionally I would eat lunch with Warner or stop to talk at his cubicle. His strangeness was mostly an outsized personality, a mix of over-the-top enthusiasm with a bit of social awkwardness. I got zero bad vibes from the guy. It wasn't long before Warner started having major performance problems at work. He would produce little to no work on most days, no show or arrive late without informing anybody, and generally act unprofessionally. One day, he showed up for work at 3:15 p.m., when our workday ended at 4:30. The office manager was livid and told him to go home. His behavior bothered nearly everybody in my office, but I did not supervise him, and we had plenty of slacker interns in the past. While his antics were a bit of a spectacle, it wasn't a big deal to me. If you're wondering why he wasn't let go, 2 words: political favor. I found out from Warner himself that he was hired because his uncle donated to the campaign of our big boss, so he wasn't going anywhere. Near the end of that summer, I put in my notice that I was leaving my job and relocating to a new state. Once Warner caught wind of this, he would constantly complain that it sucked I was leaving because we barely had time to become friends. I would always laugh lightly in response and give a sympathetic yeah. He would start to monopolize my time at work more and more, and it became disruptive to the people who sat near me. I found it slightly annoying, but I was extremely happy to be leaving that job for reasons unrelated to Warner, and I spent my last month there not caring much about what my coworkers thought. I tolerated him lingering by my desk. One day he caught me leaving work and offered me a ride home. I usually took the bus, and occasionally other coworkers would offer me rides home if they were going my way, so this didn't seem odd to me at all. I accepted and walked to his car with him. It smelled awful and was full of garbage. He hastily cleared off the passenger seat and apologized. We got on our way, but once we were on the main road, he started begging me to stop and get dinner with him. I laughed and said he didn't need to ask me that insistently, and said we could stop at a diner on the way. We had a nice meal with pleasant conversation. He was intelligent and had a variety of interests. Our political positions aligned, and we shared disdain for our cranky old coworkers. I had a good time. I expressed that he didn't need to drive me all the way home now that it was late, but he kept insisting, so I relented. As I directed him toward my house, he started in again with whining about how our developing friendship was cut short because I was moving. At this point, I was kind of tired of hearing this. The decision to leave my job and move away from home was extremely difficult to make, and I was proud of how bold I was being. I stopped responding or laughing, and his whining faded out. We came up to the turn to get onto my street, and when I pointed it out, he accelerated and drove right past it, laughing. I laughed in a "oh man, WTF" type of way, thinking he was joking around. When I began giving instructions about how to turn around and get back, he started begging me to keep hanging out with him because he was lonely. This immediately set me on high alert. It suddenly hit me that I'm in a man's car, someone I don't know all that well, who doesn't exercise proper behavior at work, which is the only context I know him on. And now he's displaying weird behavior outside of work as well. My instinct was to not insist I be let out of his car. I felt as this would escalate the situation into something worse, and in hindsight, it may have been the right thing to do when I think about the type of person he turned out to be. I told him, yeah, we could hang out at the park near my house if you want to talk. He seemed to like the idea, and we parked and walked over. The pleasant conversations resumed. Besides the weird clinginess, he was perfectly fine to talk to, until he dumped his entire life story on me, including his prior arrest for theft, his heroin addiction, and related struggles with depression. I tried to be sympathetic, but I was put off by this. It was a lot of highly personal information all at once, and I was still on alert because of his prior behavior. I tried changing the subject by showing him pics of my dog. I scrolled one pic too far, and the next one was a photo of me wearing makeup and posing cutely. Way different than the slob I was at work. He grabbed the phone and went, "Wow, you are very photogenic." I felt awkward and didn't say anything. There was a long silence, and then he launched into a weird tangent about how compatible we are and that we have similar interests, and that he wishes I wasn't moving so we could try hanging out again, but on a date. I didn't say anything, and he broke the silence with, "Sorry I'm saying all of this stuff. I'm actually high right now, that's why I know where Riverside, a bad neighborhood that had previously come up in conversation, is. I went there yesterday to buy. Otherwise, I wouldn't have said it. I'm really sorry." Internally, I freaked out. He had definitely put his drug addiction in the past tense, and I assumed it was something he was recovering from, not currently using. I also realized I had been in a car he was operating while he was under the influence. I don't know anything about heroin, so I was clueless. I felt very stupid. He immediately started whining and begging me to not judge him or hate him, and kept saying over and over how nice I am and understanding that I am, that I'm pretty and smart. All of these weird compliments interspersed with talking down about himself. I don't know what to do, so I smiled reassuringly and told him not to worry, but that I was tired and wanted to go home. That's when he started crying. He had this weird wheezy sob, but no tears were coming out. I sat there silently while he did this, trying to come up with some sort of graceful escape plan. My patience was wearing thin, and my anxiety was through the roof. It's a weird feeling to be annoyed and panicky at the same time. I stood up and apologized, said the park was close to my house, so I'll walk, and started to leave when I remembered I left my stuff in his car. Trying a new approach, I casually mentioned I forgot my stuff in his car and joked that if he wanted my dirty lunch containers, he could keep them. He ceased his bizarre crying, stood up and ran over to his car to unlock it, and I grabbed my stuff out of his back seat. His demeanor changed drastically as he calmly apologized for making things weird and asked if he could drop me off at home so I didn't have to walk alone at night. I said yes, but made him drop me off a block over from my little side street so he wouldn't see which house was mine. I could end it there, but what bothered me the most about this guy happened after this encounter. I'll make this part short. A week or two after that weird evening, at the end of August by this point, I had my last day at the job and moved 1,000 miles across the country. Warner would sometimes text me long ramblings, detailing his feelings about himself and about our missed opportunity. I didn't respond to these messages. Now that I wasn't near him, I didn't feel the need to entertain it. The text stopped after a few weeks and I forgot about him. Fast forward to February and I get a text from a former coworker. Her message said, "Sorry you had to hear about it this way," and her next message was a link to a local news article titled, "Man dies from wounds in Riverside, stabbing Wednesday." Because of the way she worded it, I thought Warner would have been the victim, but when I read the article, it included his mugshot in the charges. He was the attacker. He murdered somebody. I felt so shocked and disgusted. I couldn't believe I knew somebody who killed another human. Later on, I called an old work friend for some details. Apparently shortly after I left the job, he was fired for trashing the men's bathroom. Like, he just threw around anything he could lift and poured all the soap out and smeared it all over the place. He then lost his apartment. Presumably, some of the articles about the stabbing described Warner as a homeless man. I have to assume that's how he ended up in the aforementioned Riverside. There are a lot of homeless drug addicts who squat in abandoned houses. I wondered if the man he stabbed had refused to give him something that he wanted, and that's how he reacted to a hard no. I don't think I made all the wisest decisions during my interactions with Warner, but I'm glad I was able to avoid setting him off like that, since he was clearly not stable. Hands down the worst intern I've ever encountered. Okay, let's get into it. For context, I'm a petite, soft-spoken, 19-year-old girl and was taking summer classes at a community college this summer. One of the classes I took was public speaking, which met Tuesdays and Thursdays. This guy, I don't even know his name, was immediately one of those kids, you know. Angry young man who makes no effort in school and blasts Limp Bizkit. He really did this. To get from our classroom that was on the second floor, you had to go down a hallway, down a stairwell to the first floor, through the main lobby and out the sliding doors. He started waiting for me after class and following me all the way down this route to my car. Didn't matter if I pretended to be on my phone, had both earbuds in, kept my head down, literally power walked my way away from him, gave him bare minimum responses. Didn't matter. He would wait for me, follow me and try to walk with me. And the whole way he would be talking to me and asking me questions, like asking me about each of the cars I drove to school, since my family has to share cars. Even after I subtly dropped that I had a boyfriend. So he definitely knows my car. I got a very bad feeling after a while of this happening and told the class's professor. She immediately took it very seriously, notified campus security and told me to always stay after class so she could walk me to my car. However, true to form, the guy stopped showing up to class for at least 2 or so weeks, so I thought it was fine and that the crisis was averted. And it was, until one day he showed up to class again. As soon as I saw him enter the room, my heart dropped. During the class, I slipped a note to my professor, telling her, he's the kid in the blue shirt, and she told me to hang around after class. I did, and so did the guy and another female student, before he tried to talk to the professor about why he should pass the class despite never showing up or doing the work. The professor asked me and the other girl to wait in the hall. From the hall, we could hear him yelling aggressively at the professor. He eventually left and came out into the hallway we were waiting in and pointed at me and said, "Wait for me." Mind you, I have no idea who this kid is. I instantly got the heebie-jeebies and rushed back into the room to tell the professor, who was equally creeped out, having overheard our conversation. The other female student came back into the room approximately 10 minutes later and told me and the professor that the guy was just standing in the hall waiting for me. The professor called campus security multiple times and phoned the front desk multiple times, but she received no responses. So we took it in our own hands and came up with a plan to leave the classroom together, pretending to be in very deep conversation with each other, walk past the guy without even looking at him, and walk down the stairwell to the main lobby. His eyes bore into us as we passed him, and when we entered the stairwell, he stood up and followed us. professor and I exchanged looks of terror but kept our cool act up, stopping at the main desk in the lobby and pretending to converse with the secretary. The guy passed us, still staring at us, and walked out of the sliding doors where he was out of our field of vision. We literally had to track down the campus security ourselves and tell them everything that had happened, and my professor was furious. After we saw security camera footage of him lurking around, she contacted the local police because she and I both had that very, very strong gut feeling that this kid was not right and that we weren't safe around him. So that public speaking class was from 3 to 5 p.m. and I had another class from 6 to 8 p.m. so I would usually drive to Wawa or something in that hour gap. However, there was no way in heck I was going anywhere because I knew the guy was waiting for me to do so. For over an hour, me, professor, security, and the secretary, tried to figure out who this kid was. None of us knew his name because he literally didn't come to class. There weren't photo IDs next to the class roster, and approximately half the original class stopped showing up. So we couldn't use a process of elimination. All we had was the security footage of him. I was escorted to and from my next class into my car at the end of the night. The security officer asked me to point out my car, and when I did, he said, "Oh wow, so he was parked right next to you." Confused, I asked what he meant, and he told me that he had been watching more security footage, and the guy got into the car parked right next to me, waited in there for a long time, and then eventually left. The thing is, I knew for a fact that I hadn't parked next to anyone when I arrived at school, because the lot was practically empty since it was summer. After finally getting home that night, I was the only person home for a few weeks. Go figure. Local police did drive-bys of my home all night and a wellness check. When I returned to the school 2 days later for my Thursday classes, I was informed of chilling information. Footage showed him waiting for me in his car on Tuesday after our shared class, which I'd already been told about. But it also showed him coming back to the parking lot at 8 p.m. when my last class got out and sitting in his car. Never told him about my schedule or any other classes I was taking. This whole time, my public speaking professor was filing reports, making complaints against the school for their incompetence, and even got a lawyer because she felt so uneasy about the kid that if he ever showed up again, she would walk out. I was in contact with the president of the entire college, the director of security of the entire college, police, etc., for days. They told me that he was banned from campus and everyone was on watch for him and that if he was spotted, he would be asked to leave. Until the director of campus security, middle-aged man, called me and told me that he identified the kid and talked to him, via a telephone call, mind you, and told me that the guy, and I quote, just wanted to be my friend, and told me that whatever I was doing with the guy, literally running away from him, probably made him think I was flirting with him. My professors were absolutely furious and excused me from physically attending class for the rest of the semester. I still am always on edge all the time, knowing that he knows what cars I drive, and for all I know, he could have followed me home. I still don't know his name, and I hope I never have to learn it. I have lots of creepy encounters during my travels, but I'll start with my most recent one. This is fairly long, as I had 2 creepy encounters, one after the other. For clarification, I am Asian with distinct Asian features, 5 foot 1 inches tall and in my 20s. Last year, I went to Egypt with a big group of 40. For one night, we stayed at this beautiful villa-style hotel on top of the mountains. The layout for this particular hotel is that there is a very long pool in the middle, surrounded by small villas with about 20 rooms per villa. Our group got assigned to the farthest villa from the lobby. It was around 10 p.m. when I decided to go out for a walk to watch the stars and all. My grandma, who I was sharing the room with, was tired and went to sleep early, so I went out by myself. I walked around the pool and enjoyed the weather and the stars. I sat on one of the benches by the poolside. It was then I noticed one of the hotel staff, a bag porter, who helped with our luggage when we checked in, approaching me. I thought nothing of it, but he came by and made small conversation. I brushed it off as him just trying to be friendly and courteous to guests. He asked where we came from and I answered politely. What he said next gave me the creeps. He said his friend was actually looking for a wife from my country. Okay dude. I laughed it off and lied that I'm married. He asked where my husband is. I kind of panicked and told him my non-existent husband got left behind because he had work. He took out his phone and called somebody, but I guess the person he was calling wasn't picking up. He told me to wait, but my spidey senses were tingling in overdrive. I had 2 options. To walk back to the villa as quickly as possible, but risk letting this man know the room where I am staying with my grandma, or walk towards the well-lighted lobby, hoping that there are people from my group still there. I stood up and started to walk fast to the lobby. This man was still trying to call somebody on his phone and tried to call after me, but I waved goodbye hurriedly. When I got to the lobby, I was relieved to see our tour leader, our Egyptian tour guide, and probably 3 ladies from our group still there. No more creepy hotel staff. In the hotel lobby, they have a bunch of souvenir shops set up. One of the ladies I was close with, B, was browsing inside one of the shops. Our guide warned us beforehand that some of the paintings they sell at this hotel is fake, or just a generally low-quality tourist trap souvenir. So I went inside the shop to tell B about that, in case she forgot. Inside the shop were B, me, and 2 salesmen. One of them was standing near the door and blocking the only means of exit. B asked for my opinion between 2 paintings, and the salesman standing in front of us told us that these paintings have a different pattern that shows up and glows in the dark. He asked if we wanted to see it. I firmly said no before B could answer. I had had enough for the day, and just wanted to go back to our room. However, this persistent salesman said something to this other man standing behind us, who then proceeded to close the door and the light switch. Screaming internally. Maybe I'm just paranoid, but I do not like the idea of it being in a pitch dark room with 2 men I don't know. I could also sense that B was panicking, and she held onto my wrist. Like an angel in disguise, the door suddenly opened from outside, and it was B's aunt, who was also in the lobby with our tour guide, who shouted at us and asked what we were doing. She motioned for us to come out quickly. I swear I do not know what would have happened if B's aunt didn't open the door at that time. She made a fuss over it, and the rest of the group walked back to the villa together with our tour leader. On the way to the villa, B's aunt asked us if anything happened, if our phones and wallets were still with us and all. We checked our belongings and everything was fine. Nobody followed us back to the villa, and I was so happy that we were also checking out the next morning. This happened about a year ago. I'm a guy, and a big guy, an ex-football player, and I'm in my late 20s. I live in a nice neighborhood in Arizona. Needless to say, I don't have much to fear at night. I had 2 roommates living with me at the time, so there always seemed to be someone home with me at night. I got home late from a business trip around midnight, came into the house exhausted, and dropped everything and went to bed. I'm a heavy sleeper, so it takes something loud to wake me. Then around 3 a.m., I hear a loud knocking on my door. It sounded like somebody was kicking it down, or trying to. I had never heard anything like it before, though it was a Saturday, so I figured my roommates had gone out to the bars and forgotten their keys. Begrudgingly stumble out of bed. Walk down the hallway in the dark and notice all the bedroom doors are open and no roommates are to be found. Ah, so it must be them. They're just messing with me. I arrive at my front door and look through the peephole and see a young woman. Homeless looking, but actually kind of cute. She had a really baggy sweatshirt on with jeans and a beanie. Might I remind you, this is Arizona in the dead of summer. It had to be 95 degrees at this time. That was odd. She was frantic, almost like she was being chased, so I was just going to open the door and make sure everything was okay. But then she started laughing, like a really scary laugh, which stopped me in my tracks, and then she proceeded to yell, "I need to pee, let me in." Over and over for a good 5 minutes. I just stood behind the door in silence watching this through the peephole. I wasn't necessarily scared at this moment, I was just annoyed and about to yell at her to get out of here. And all of a sudden she just turned and hopscotched down my driveway like a child. Just thought to myself, this girl is whacked out on drugs or something. I go back to bed. 30 minutes later, I'm just about to fall back asleep and that same knock happens again. I'm furious at this point and run out there. Open the door and give this woman a piece of my mind. But I look through the peephole first and it's a guy. He is dressed in practically the same outfit as the woman. He is scrawny looking, not a physical presence by any means. But he looks just as whacked out as her. I can see her behind the guy jumping up and down laughing. He is looking into the peephole yelling, "Yo dude, my girl has to pee, let us in." Now I'm a little freaked out, not going to lie. I've seen a lot of situations like this in horror movies, so I just back away from the door, go to the kitchen, grab a knife, go back to my room and sit in my closet. LOL. I figured if they were going to break in, at least they wouldn't see me at first in the closet and I could launch a counterattack. 2 hours pass. No more noises and I fall asleep in my closet with knife in hand. Then I hear tapping on my bedroom window. It startles me awake. My bedroom is on the first floor and is accessible from the backyard. The lights are off, so I creep over to the window and slowly push aside one of the blinds. It's the woman peering into my bedroom but not looking directly at me, just subtly tapping the window. And off in the distance was the guy butt-ass naked, doing cannonballs into my pool. I instinctively, without thinking, yell, "Hey, get out of my pool," which brings her attention straight to me. We make eye contact and we are inches away from each other with eyes wide open. She has the scariest smile and starts laughing. That freaked the heck out of me. Instantly I call the cops and tell them some crazy drugged up wackos are in my backyard. I fear for my life. Please send somebody. I went into my bathroom, locked the door, and just waited for the "here's Johnny" moment to happen. The dispatcher informed me the cops were there, but nobody was outside the house. They must have run off into the alley when the cops showed up. The next day, I see the neighborhood watch flyers, and they're all over informing us that over the past 3 nights, 6 homes had been broken into, and 4 dogs had been brutally tortured and killed. So keep an eye out for any strange people in the neighborhood. The hairs on my neck stood straight up, but I have never heard from or seen those 2 wackos since. Installed an alarm system, got a handgun, and I sleep great now. But that look on that woman's face still haunts my dreams. I'm currently experiencing something crazy at my gym, which reminded me of Brett. I am a male. When I was around 19, I got really into weightlifting at my university's rec center. It was a massive complex with multiple weight rooms, 2 indoor tracks, an Olympic swimming pool, the works. I lift like 4 to 5 times a week and often cool off with laps in the pool. One day in the weight room, I was approached by a guy named Brett. He didn't look like a student. He was older, probably in his late 30s, early 40s, but very friendly. The rec center wasn't just for students. Anybody could purchase a membership. Casual conversation is pretty common in gyms, and I was so naive in those days I didn't think anything of it when he asked personal questions, like where I was from and where I worked, which was at a grocery store in my hometown, the next town over. I didn't see this guy in the gym every day, but it was common to run into him a couple times a week. We'd shoot the shit for a bit, and I began to sense that he was interested in more than just saying hi. One day, he mentioned that he'd been to the grocery store where I worked but didn't see me there and wanted to know what my schedule was. I immediately recognized that this wasn't normal and that I didn't want to talk to this guy anymore. I lied and told him my schedule was different every week and got back to my workout. One day, not long after, I was walking into work to start my shift. We started at 9 a.m., and he was there in the foyer just hanging around. He called out and tried to talk to me, but I told him, "Hey man, I'm at work right now." After that, I didn't really talk to him in the gym anymore. Looking for me at my job was too weird, and it pissed me off. He'd approach me, and I'd just coldly say, "Hey," and look away. The final straw was one evening when I just finished swimming some laps. The shower room was an open room with 4 shower stands, each with 4 nozzles pointing north, east, south, and west, so 4 people could use the same stand at once. No curtains, no partitions. Which may seem odd these days, but I never thought anything of it since I grew up swimming at this pool. I was in there alone showering, my swim trunks hanging on the drying rack, when I glanced toward the doorway to the locker area and saw this creeper peeking around the doorway watching me shower. He immediately ducked back and was gone by the time I finished up and went to get dressed. I went straight to the service counter to report what happened. I only knew his first name, but they seemed to know who I was talking about. Never saw him again after that. A few years ago, my brother-in-law bought another apartment complex in Florida. He owns a few apartments in West Palm Beach, Miami, etc. So when he told me he just bought another one and wanted me to manage it, I figured why the heck not. I had just graduated from college with my degree and planned to go get my master's, so I figured I could manage his place and do graduate school. When he booked my flight to Orlando, I was stoked. Heck yeah, I love Disney and I dreamed about buying a year pass and checking out all the neat parks. Then, when I got there, we drove out of Orlando and I had a bad feeling. He bought the apartment in a town called Leesburg. It's only an hour or so from Orlando. It's as if a biker town in a retirement community had a baby. I was a little disappointed that I was an hour from Orlando with its nightlife, clubs, and whatnot. I made it work though, and soon settled into life, managing a small apartment complex. I had my own 1-bedroom apartment in the corner, and there were 10 other tenants. Most were older folks, snowbirds and retirees that spent their days golfing and swimming in the pool we had. There were 2 military families, one with small kids. Then there was Andy. Andy was an enormous man. I'm a pretty big guy myself, 6'4", 250 pounds. But he was at least 6'6" and 400 pounds. He walked with a cane and had black hair he put in a ponytail. He worked from home, or so he said, but rumor was he was on disability after a horrible work accident. I didn't really care. He paid his rent on time. He was quiet and kept to himself. I was only in his place once when his AC was cut out, and to my surprise, he was actually pretty neat. There were no food containers or pizza boxes, beer cans, etc. But I expected a big guy like him to have lying out. Things in our complex went pretty well for the next year, until one night in November. It was raining like it always does in Florida, and it was about midnight when somebody rang my doorbell. I looked out and saw one of my tenants, Joseph. Joe was one of my retirees who retired to Florida to, in his words, play golf and drink beer. Normally, he was all smiles and jokes, but that night his face was pale and he looked frightened. I hate to bother you, Sam, but something isn't right with Andy. I put my jacket on and followed him to his apartment. Since Andy was his neighbor, he put his finger to his lip and motioned for me to listen. I put my ear up to the door and heard Andy fighting with somebody. It sounded like whoever he was fighting with was throwing things. I was taken aback as he never had a guest over ever in the year he had lived there. So I knocked and I heard him stomp over the door and open it. He looked. Normally he was very well dressed and put together, and like I said, he wasn't a messy guy. But he answered in a shirt that had grease stains. His hair was limp and greasy, and he smelled like B.O. I peered in behind him and saw his place was a disaster. I asked him if everything was okay. He was irritated and told me it was and pretty much shut the door in my face. I sent Joe back into his place, told him to let me know if he heard anything else, and went to bed. The next morning, I decided to pay Andy a visit to see if he was okay, and so I went to his place and knocked again. No answer, so I decided I would try back later. Got busy doing other things and then forgot all about it. December rolls around and I am starting to get the monthly rent checks. None from Andy. That got me a bit worried. He was always on time with his checks. So I knocked on his door. Nothing. I knocked again and heard grunting and moaning. Now, I should have called the police first, but I didn't. I opened the door with my key ring and was hit with the foulest smell ever. It smelled like piss, shit, vomit, and BO all rolled into one nasty smell. The walls were streaked with what I assume was crap, and the place was trashed. I start calling for Andy while dialing 911, and I hear the moaning from the back bedroom. I can never unsee what I saw, ever. To this day, I get flashbacks. Andy was naked and lying on the floor of his room on some dirty clothes. He was covered in his own crap and piss, and there were piles of vomit on the carpet. That was bad, but what was even more weird was that he was covered in bites. Human bites all over his arms and legs, and they were starting to smell with infection. He was also bleeding from his rectum. I wondered who attacked him. Was it the woman we heard him fighting with? I didn't get my answers until a few days later. He had been rushed to the hospital and was fighting for his life in the ICU. The doctors talked to his sister, who turned out to be his medical guardian, and things slowly came into place. Turns out, Andy suffered from multiple mental disorders. He stopped taking his meds in the month before November. There was no other person that night. He was arguing with himself. Those bites he inflicted himself, and the bleeding in his rectum was from inserting a foreign object in there and doing so much damage, it ruptured his internal organs. He ended up pulling through and went home to live with his sister. I had the task of cleaning his apartment, and what I found while cleaning pretty much freaks me out as much as finding him. He had a shoebox full of cutouts from magazines, old family photos, and even photos he obviously took of the residents of the apartments, including myself. All the eyes were burnt out with cigarettes, and on some of them X's were put over the mouths. I'm not sure if that was part of his mental decline or if he was always that creepy and I never noticed it. This just happened a few hours ago. I've called and reported it to the police, and I'm home safely, but I guess I'm still in shock. Could do with putting it down in writing to process it, and figured this is as good as a place as any to share what happened. I finished work early today, and so I decided to go out for a run. I set out around 4:30 and decided my usual routes, which crossed many roads. Would not be very practical, and so I took an alternate route along a canal towpath and some pathways through woods that I knew would be less busy. Everything was going well. I was pushing myself steadily until I got to a pathway on the way back around 6 kilometers into the route. It is a long straight path with a canal on the left side, and on the right there is wasteland where some factories used to be but have been mostly demolished. It has been left abandoned for as long as I can remember and is overgrown with trees and weeds, but there are the odd bits of an old factory that for some reason weren't fully demolished. As I got level with one part of the factory, which still had some old metal fire escape steps attached to it, I noticed a rough-looking guy sitting on the wall with his legs hanging down. He jumped to his feet as he saw me coming and shouted something, but I couldn't make it out. As I came level to where he was, I heard him say, "Wait there, can you help me find my phone?" He said this while he was running down the steps, and so I stopped as I got level with where the bottom of the steps was, meaning we were just standing just a few feet apart but with a fence in between us. It was a really old iron fence with vertical metal bars that have spikes at the top like you sometimes see around churches and things. He asked me if I would help him find his phone again, saying he had dropped it somewhere nearby, and asked if I could ring his number so he could listen for it. I felt I couldn't exactly refuse as my phone was strapped to my arm, so I said he could tell me the number, and I took my phone off my arm and unlocked it. He blurred out a phone number but said it too fast, and it didn't begin with 07, which made me start to feel like something wasn't right. Although I was beginning to suspect at this point, I wasn't really worried. I am in pretty good shape and have had a big size and weight advantage over him, plus there was a fence between us. He didn't seem in very good physical shape and seemed like he might be homeless. Figured if he was trying to mug me for my phone, his only chance would be if he pulled a knife, so I made sure to stay a good distance away from the fence and kept my eye on his hands. So I told him I didn't catch any of the numbers because he said it too quickly, and he came out with another number. This time it did have 07 at the beginning. I entered 7 numbers, and then he started to look around, saying, "I can hear it. Come and help me look," as he looked around at the ground. I was about to say that I hadn't even finished dialing when a much larger guy appeared from behind a section of wall to my right. He was also really scruffy looking, and from the look in his eyes, it seemed like he was on drugs. He came out saying he could hear the phone ringing over towards him and beckoned me to come through a gap in the fence and help look. The first guy then said, "It is ringing, yeah?" And I told him, even though I still hadn't dialed the last digits, that it was, and now I was sure they were trying to lure me to come over to that side of the fence. After 2 or 3 times of them both beckoning me to come help, always insisting they could hear the ring, I heard the second guy say, "Dude, he's not going to fall for it." He said in a hushed way as if he thought I wouldn't hear, but with it being out in the middle of nowhere, I could clearly understand what he said. Then the first guy started acting quite aggressive and punched a tree, telling me he needed the phone badly and how his whole life was on the phone, telling me to come and help him look for it. While he was punching the tree and ranting, the second guy had taken a few steps away to the right, meaning I couldn't keep my eyes on both at the same time. It was after 5 p.m. by this point, and it had gotten dark all of a sudden, which made the whole thing even more unsettling. I noticed there was a gap in the fence where some of the bars had been removed right where the second guy was heading, yet I decided at that point to get the heck out of there and made a run for it. Neither of them said anything as I ran away, which makes me sure they had malicious intentions. If they genuinely lost their phone and needed help, I would expect them to shout, "Where are you going?" or something to try and get me to come back, but they didn't shout anything at all. After sprinting for a good 30 seconds, I turned to see if they were chasing me. They were both standing on the path around where the gap in the fence had been, but not chasing me at all. They were just standing there watching me run away. I continued running away, but kept looking back every few seconds, until I was out of sight. It was at this point I got off the canal path and onto the roads. The person I spoke to on the phone to report it took my details in the descriptions, but seemed to think it wasn't anything worth any worry, and said it will be investigated though. The whole incident has left me a bit unnerved, and I am pretty sure I won't be jogging that route alone anytime soon.